Welcome to On the Ballot with Ballotpedia, where we connect people to politics by providing neutral, nonpartisan, and reliable information on our government, how it works, and where it's headed.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of On the Ballot. I'm your host, Norman Leahy. I'm a senior editor here at Ballotpedia, and once a month, we have something very special. We have something called Office Hours, and that's where we touch base and get some insights into what Ballotpedia really does behind the scenes with our CEO and founder, Leslie Graves, who joins me right now. Leslie, welcome back.
Yeah, good morning.
And one of the things I'm sure that all of the people watching and listening to this podcast subscribe to the Daily Brew, where they will see not only that we talk about something called robust information a lot, but that you've lately been writing about the individual components of what we define as robust information. Now, just for a recap purposes, when Ballotpedia talks about robust information, what do we mean?
Sure. So first of all, we really only use that word to describe the information that we are attempting to secure for our readers about the 500,000 local elected officials. And those are all of the elected lawmakers who are below the level of state legislature. So it would be city council, county commission, school board, and so on. There are about 500,000 of those people across the country. So it's not possible. It will not be possible now or ever for Ballotpedia to give each of those candidates and elections the same attention that we give to a state legislative race or a state legislator or a U.S. House member on a governor or whatever. It's just not possible. However, it takes as much time and if we were, it would take as much time and creativity and attention and care and thoughtfulness to cover one school board election with two candidates as it would to cover one U.S. Senate election with two candidates. They each have their themes and principles and so forth. But if you take that times 500,000, it just doesn't, it's hard to do. So our definition of robust data are the minimal pieces of information that we think we can get that would tell our readers enough about the candidates to make a reasonably informed decision about who they want to vote for.
Well, two things come out of what you just said. First, that there are 500,000 local elected officials in the country, which is, I think that's about the population of Wyoming, right? Roughly.
Yeah.
So, okay, just put it in perspective. But also, we are so used to looking at our telephone, a smartphone, and I did this recently. I was looking at booking stuff for a trip where I can find out 2 months in advance what's happening in a city across the country from where I live. What's nearby, what restaurants are nearby, what hours they're open, what's on their menu. But you're telling me that I can't necessarily find out anything about the people running for school board where I live right now. Why?
Whether they're running for school board or whether they are in fact on the school board. So this is a problem not just about candidates, but also it's a problem about incumbents. Yeah.
But how did we get here?
Well, they're just, for one thing, it's a lot harder to track and keep in touch with the local elected officials and the candidates that are running against them because it changes a lot. There's a lot of turnover. Whereas if you're going on, say, Yelp to see what the coffee shops are in this town 100 miles away from you, even though coffee shops do go in and out of business and they change their hours every so often, they don't change them nearly as often as these candidates and these local elected lawmakers change. There's just a lot of motility. So you have to do more of it. And also, whose best interest is it in to get this information? It's really a common good, what's best for the country sort of a project. And we really believe it has to be done by a nonprofit, which is what we are. And it just requires a tremendous amount of work. And that work is being done by our donors who give us gifts so that we can, work on this, by our readers who send us notes of support, by our staff, and by an ever-growing group of volunteers who help us get this information.
And so let's break this down. There are roughly 5 big buckets of things that we believe can help provide a more broad, rounded, even sometimes nuanced pictures of these local candidates. And I think one of the most important because it was the very first column you did on this, is our candidate connection survey. Can you explain that briefly?
Sure. We first developed what we call the Candidate Connection Survey to cover some school board elections in September of 2018. So that was 7 years ago. We wanted each of the candidates to have an opportunity to open up and share a little bit about who they are. One of the things that we decided on at that very moment was that we did not want to do a gotcha survey or a gotcha interview. So the idea of it wasn't to get them, kind of get them to say something that later on would prove to be incriminating or anything. It was just a bunch of questions that we kind of randomly came up with. We've changed them over the years to allow the candidate to open up and say who they really are. So it has some, sort of social questions on it, like what's your favorite book, things like that. But it turned out when people answer those questions and you read through their answers, you're like, wow, I really feel like I know this person, whether I know them in a way that would cause me to think I'm never voting for you, bud, or whether it would cause you to think, wow, this person really speaks to me. They have the same favorite book I do, or whatever. And so it opens up beyond the realm of, well, here are the two things I want to try to accomplish if I get elected to the school board. It does ask that question, but it also creates a bigger picture about the person.
And so, like any survey, even ones that are basically done for a horse race coverage of, say, a congressional election, it's
Yeah.
tough to get responses, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it is. And especially if we're thinking about the whole universe of the 500,000 electeds and the candidates that run against them. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One of them is that for candidates who are running in low population counties, school boards, and cities, their their notion, totally legitimately, of how they go about making their candidacy known is by yard signs and saying hi to people in the grocery store parking lot because they only have 1,000 voters or whatever it is. So for them, the extra work that they would have to go to fill out this survey, which we have a shortened version of it, so it only take 20 minutes, but the longer version, it requires you to sit down and kind of think for an hour and do some thoughtful reflection. A lot of the candidates who fill it out get a kick out of it, but which busy adult do you know of that has an hour to do that? They're running for office. They they have a lot of other responsibilities in their life. So they don't need to fill it out to get elected. They're
Right.
right about that. But
Yeah,
so
because
for
they run essentially
yeah.
what are shoe leather campaigns, right?
Right. So for our pitch to those wonderful people who are doing tough work for very little recognition or almost no pay, in many cases no pay, is that we hope they will fill it out for the sake of history. Because think of how great it would be if we got massive numbers of those candidates who are only running in very small jurisdictions to tell everybody who they are. That would be just great, historic. Wouldn't that be great? We're excited
It,
about that.
yeah, because there are generations
Yeah.
of political scientists yet unborn who would
Yeah,
just
yeah,
love that
waiting to know
stuff.
what they think in
Yeah,
these low population parts of the country. I want to know what they think.
yeah, that's
Mhm.
the kind of primary documents that are like gold when you find them.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
another one is endorsements
yeah.
that candidates. So,
So,
what about that one?
let's imagine that we're covering a race and we can't get any surveys returned or whatever, or even if we do. Another piece of information that's pretty vital about a local candidate is who endorsed them. And by the way, one of the reasons it matters that we run around and do all this is because nearly all of these local candidates don't run in a nonpartisan election. So when you go into the voting booth up top, even if you've done zero research, you can see Republican or Democrat, and if that's your party preference, people just vote on that. Whether they should or not, they just do. We all know that. But once you get a little bit down the ballot, all of a sudden there are no more R's or D's. So you're like, huh.
Mhm.
Now what am I
Right.
going to do? It happens to all of us, but we want to make it so it doesn't happen to all of us. But anyway, in many, many, many parts of the country, there are what we are now calling local endorsing organizations. And these are groups of volunteers that sprang up for whatever reason, maybe 20 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. And it's a group of people that got together to research the bottom of their ballot and issue endorsements about them. And essentially when they do that, they are serving the function of a local party, a local Democratic or Republican party, except they don't have that in their name. So for example, there's something called the Conservative Club of Orange County, California, and they do endorsements down the ballot. There are
Okay.
other groups across the country that have the word progressive in their name, and they issue endorsements. There also are special interest group, what I call special interest groups that are well known to everybody, whether it be Planned Parenthood or a local unit of the National Rifle Associations. And sometimes, but not everywhere, they do endorsements down the ballot. But the thing about these endorsements is that many people, if they know of a particular candidate in Orange County, California, and they only know one thing about that person, and that is that that person was endorsed by the Conservative Club of Orange County, they would say, well, then I'm not voting for them. Or they would be like, oh, bring it on. That's who I want to vote for. So just have one endorsement can be very helpful for a person. And those endorsing groups, they sit down and do all this research. They do a lot
And
of
so,
research before they decide who to endorse.
and what's the challenge of finding endorsements at this level?
It's not that hard to find endorsements at this level. So this is
Okay.
for us, gathering this information is much easier than getting people to fill out our survey. Because,
Okay.
all of these local endorsing organizations, they have a website, they have some presence. Now, so we just are finding them and we're building a database of them and reaching out to them and asking us to proactively submit their list of endorsees when they do it. But we've also built something called an endorsement portal so that they don't even need to talk to us. They can just pop it in there. So we're going to gradually build that up. And we think these groups of local endorsing organizations are an overlooked but super interesting part of the American democratic landscape. They've been doing all this in many cases for years. Nobody pays much attention to them. But they're doing pretty hard work and it's pretty useful. We want
And
to sort of bring them together in a kind of a community, even the ones that don't agree with each other.
okay, that'll be fun. Now, what about
Yeah.
candidates who sign pledges? So I'm going to support X policy
Yeah.
or I'm going to oppose Y. How about that?
Mhm. Yeah. So some special interest groups that we've all probably heard of, not every election cycle, but every so often will go to the candidates and ask them to sign a pledge. And a well-known example, or at least well-known to me, example of this is a national group called U.S. Term Limits. So they have a term limits pledge. So when candidates are running for office, they will ask those people to sign their term limits pledge. And then if they do, they will sometimes put advertising dollars behind them. But even if they don't do that, they'll just list them on their website. So, and there are other groups that do that. Now, unfortunately for our local elected officials project, there aren't a ton of groups that ask candidates at the very lower levels to sign pledges, but there still are some. And again, that can be very illuminating for the voter, even if that's the only piece of information you have about them, that they signed the pledge to something, to change the name of the high school football team, or to not change the name of the high school football team. Maybe that's all you know about them. Well, that's not a bad piece of information to have.
And along that same vein are things like
Mm.
scorecards. I
Yes.
know some
Mhm.
groups have done those for a long time, especially Congress, state legislatures. What about at the local level?
Yeah. So you're right. There are a lot of national organizations and wealthy state-based organizations that do scorecards of like the state ones of their state legislators or governor or whatever, which is a signaling. Those scorecards, by the way, are mostly a signaling mechanism within the Democratic Party caucus or within the Republican Party caucus. So those scorecards are mostly going to tell you between these two Republicans, this is the one that's really a Republican, or over here that between these two Democrats, this is the staunch Democrat. The scorecards mostly serve that function. But increasingly, there are some scorecard issuing organizations also at the local level. It might be city level where they're rating them on their attitudes toward or their votes that they've taken on housing policy and zoning. And maybe measuring that in against what's now known as the abundance agenda. So there are more of those. So if we can find that, that's also really an important piece of information for a voter to have.
And are we finding those becoming more numerous, or what's your
They are
sense?
becoming more numerous, but one of the things about both endorsements, pledges, and scorecards is that they're scattered. So for us to find them requires I mean, obviously very doable, but painstaking effort to find all of them, and that to do it in California or Wyoming or wherever, and get them corralled and get that organized. So we can pull in all the information, fact check it, and make sure it's all legit before we publish it.
Speaking of fact checking, another one of these big pillars is campaign themes. Now, that's a
Yeah.
very big topic that seems to catch everything from, I don't know, a bumper sticker to a stump speech to a white paper.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so themes are interesting. They are illuminating. Now, a lot of times you can tell what a candidate's themes are without telling what the candidate's views on those themes are. So, for example, you might be able to deduce that candidate Susan has indicated that abortion is an important theme of hers. But that, well, which side? You need to do a little bit more work on that. Although there are some that you can tell just by the name of the theme. Like if the theme is taxes. Norm, what do you think? Do you think a candidate who says the theme is taxes wants lower taxes or higher taxes?
Well, since 1984 in the Mondale campaign, probably lower taxes.
That's right. If a candidate actually does believe that they're not going to be able to balance the city budget or whatever without a tax bump, they're not going to talk about it in their campaign because they would be worried that would be unpopular. So they're not going to say it's a theme. So the ones who do say it's a theme probably want lower taxes. So you can do some things about it. However, the problem for our voters and our readers about themes is that they're all the heck all over the place.
Mm-hmm. So it's
the typical
sorting them, right?
Well, if you get a mail-in ballot and you open it up at 3 weeks before the election, you're going to research it, and you get down to the hard part, and then you're like, okay, I'm going to go on the internet and find out who these people are. Well, one of them might have filled out the Ballotpedia survey. Another one might have filled out the Project Vote Smart survey. Another one might have not filled out neither survey, but they have a big old website. Or another one might only talk on Instagram. Or another one might have done an interview with their local newspaper. It's all over the place. So you would get carpal tunnel syndrome looking for all of that. And after you had researched 2 candidates, you would go to bed and never do it again, in my opinion. At least that's what I would do. So we are trying to make life easier by finding all of the different things and putting them in one place and letting our readers know what these candidates are saying, wherever it is that they're saying it, about what they're running on.
So these are the 5 big buckets, and to put them all together, what do you think is, if you had to put your finger on it, is the single greatest obstacle to gathering this information and delivering it to someone on their sample ballot that Ballotpedia produces and is awesome, by the way?
Yeah, it certainly, if we had like $100 gazillion, we could go get all that information that already exists out there and pull it in with paid staffers. Nobody doubts that. But I don't think that's particularly a good use of donor dollars, even if we had those donor dollars. To me, it makes more sense to build a strong, robust volunteer organization that's steady into the future, that makes this part of their contribution to American democracy, to help get that every year. But the biggest obstacle is getting the list of the candidates in the first place, because to obtain who in fact is running and when are they running, that involves a lot of gathering information from what in fact are 7,700 local election websites all over the country, and only then do you know the names of the candidates. And a lot of times that doesn't happen until about 2 months, sometimes less, before the election. So all of a sudden you've got to go do a lot of work really quickly to get the information in time for our readers and any readers anywhere to have some substantive information. And for example, if we want, as we do, every candidate in the country to fill out our survey, typically the way they learn about it, unless they've done it in a previous cycle and then they do it every time, is we have to email them. So we have to find their email address, and you would not believe how many challenges there are about that.
No, I would believe that.
Yeah.
Because it's stunning the amount of stuff that people volunteer on social media, and yet for some things they're totally invisible. You can't find them at all. And I
Yeah,
think
it
it's
is
especially
interesting.
with something about this, what is so important. If you're running for office, don't you think they have an obligation to at least have, this is my dummy page where you can
Mhm.
send me an email or you can, or whatever, or is that just, we're not there yet?
Yeah, a lot of we've interviewed candidates to especially lower down to see what kind of obstacles they may encounter to doing things like filling out our survey, which
Mm,
also means they won't fill out anybody else's survey either, like the local newspaper. Just people have a little bit of a hesitation about being online. If
sure.
you if you if you don't have to be online to get elected, do you want to be online? There's a little bit of that. There's a little bit of fear of what's going to happen to me if I express my views on these questions and they go online. Something bad going to happen to me. Wouldn't we all reasonably fear that? In fact, nothing bad does happen, but you can imagine that you would think it would happen. So
Right.
I just think there's a little bit of a fear that's completely understandable.
It is, and which is in itself deeply regrettable. That's where we seem to be right
Mm.
now. But to go, end on a happier note, I do want to know that we'll put in the production notes below here, where if you are a candidate, you can fill out a candidate connection survey,
Yeah.
and if you want to volunteer to help us find this information, we'll have a link where you can go and sign up there too. And in the meantime, Leslie, I know you're super busy, but I appreciate you taking the time to join us on the ballot today. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. It was great to visit with you.
And for everybody else, we'll be back soon with another episode of On the Ballot. Until then, I encourage you to, pick us up wherever you listen to podcasts, watch us on YouTube. I promise it's awesome. And we'll be back soon with another episode. I'm Norm Leahy, your host, and we'll see you on the digital pages of Ballotpedia. Take care.